people. I learned something very important from Jessica's speech. Never agree to speak after her. Donna, thank you for inviting us, and thank you for being a great hostess. And I just have to say, I'm honored and overwhelmed to be standing before you this evening. You have many things you could be doing this evening. Instead, you chose to be here. And that's significant because in 2015, none of us would have been spending a Sunday evening talking to newsletter writers and making a contribution to helping defend our democracy. My wife couldn't be here because we're splitting. We have our in-laws with us, and they invited us both out to dinner to thank us for putting them up at our house for the last 10 days. We learned about this 2 days ago, and we both didn't feel like we could turn down that kind invitation. So she sends her regards, and as I've said in the newsletter, everything I am, it's because of her. So I wish she could be here to say hello to you. I'll give you a little bit of personal insight. Every Sunday, we get in our car and we drive to Mass, and on the way we look at each other and say, why are we still doing this? It's a very hard thing to be a Catholic these days. But today, the priest came through. I think he scared himself. He talked about current events. And one of the things he said in his sermon is he quoted Sir Edmund Burke, the Anglo-Irish politician and philosopher, who said, the only thing necessary for evil to prevail is for good people to do nothing. And that is a profound statement that we should all take to heart. But it completely misses the point of this moment in time. We need to turn that upside down and say what it takes for good to prevail is for good people to do something. We don't all have to be elected politicians. We don't have to be party leaders. We don't have to have the ability to write a $100,000 check to have dinner with Nancy Pelosi, God bless her. We do need good people to do something. 81.2 million people voted for Joe Biden in 2020. If 81 million people did something every week, the future of our democracy would be secure beyond belief. Sadly, not every good person does something. Many people don't do anything. It falls on the shoulders of a smaller group of people, you, to do more than your fair share for the rest of us. And there's a saying that if enough of us do good, we can save all of us. And that is what you are doing every day, every night. That's what you're doing tonight. So from the bottom of my heart, as a husband, father, and grandfather, thank you, thank you, thank you. I am honored and in your debt. Thank you. I apologize for those of you who know the founding story of the newsletter, but I think it's important because it's reinforced every day. I assured my 3 adult daughters and my wife that Trump would not win. And when he did, and this is just between us, one of my daughters had what would be an emotional break. And Jill and I flew to Washington, D.C. to help stabilize her. We helped her get professional help. We helped her with drugs to help stabilize her. And she was, she said to us, "You told us it was going to be okay. And I told you it wasn't." And he won. And I felt responsible in some part for giving false assurances to my daughter, all of my daughters. And so it was difficult for her in particular, but for all of my daughters to even watch Trump on television, to see his image, to hear his voice, to hear the lies. And so they began to withdraw from politics. And Jill and I talked about it, and we agreed that we understood that, but that wasn't healthy, that they needed to know what was going on. So Jill said, God bless her, "Why don't you write an email every night to them telling them what happened during the day? And so there'll be some distance between what's happened, but they'll know what's happening." So in late November, early December, I began to just write a nightly email. In the very first week of February 2017, as I was writing it each night, I put today's edition in the subject line of the email, and that just stuck, which is why the newsletter has such a stupid name. But it's stuck, and then 3 close family friends knew about the nightly email and said, "Gee, we're having difficulty processing the news. Can you send it to us?" So we did, and they sent it to other friends, and they sent it to other friends. And when it got to, we were sending it to 200 people a night, we looked at each other and said, "Can you believe it? 200 people a night want to read what we have to say." This week, the newsletter will pass the 50,000 subscriber mark. And every week, at least one day, we have more than 100,000 opens. The newsletter has a very high pass-along rate. And I will say that that's humbling and scary, or it should be, but it's not, because all I'm doing any night is I'm writing to my daughters and my wife. I'm telling them the same thing that I told them in 2016 and 2017, that it's going to be okay. And I know from hearing from readers every day that many of you still feel that anxiety and that fear, and Jessica alluded to it. What if this happens? What if that happens? And I'm here to say, and this is not a false assurance, I'm here to say it's going to be okay. Democracy is going to prevail. America is bigger than MAGA extremism, and it sure as heck is bigger than Donald Trump. And we're going to make it through this. It may get worse before it gets better, but we are going to prevail. And one of the things that I always try to impress on my daughters is a sense of perspective. I made them memorize the timeline of the universe. And when we get together now for dinner, I say, okay, how old is the universe? 13.8 billion years. How old is the Earth? 4.58 billion years. How old is life on Earth? 4.3 billion. How old is civilization? 10,000 years. And so things have been very rough for about 5 years. The truth is, our nation has lived through more difficult times as a nation. The collective we here tonight, have lived privileged lives where we have not had to live in fear that our democracy is at stake. But there are many of our friends and neighbors and co-citizens alive today who lived through Jim Crow and who had to count a jar of jelly beans correctly to have the right to vote, who could have a family member murdered in the middle of Main Street and not get a conviction because an all-white jury let the murderer go free. As bad as it is now for all of us, it has never been that bad, I don't believe, for any of us. I was the managing partner of a law firm, and one of my partners was very rough on other people, and I would get partners and employees come into me and say, I had this interaction with Joanne, and she did this to me, and she did that to me, and she said this to me, and all of these bad things. And I said, well, the first thing I want to ask is, what makes you think you're so special? That's the way she treats everybody. And in that sort of flippant response, I think is a truth, which is one of our enemies is that we close in on ourselves, and we think these things are happening to us and to us alone, but they're not. They're happening to a great nation, a nation whose economy is bigger than most of the economies in the world combined. A nation that has lived through civil war, a nation that has fought and won 2 world wars. Yes, times are tough, but in moments of crisis, there are enough of us who care that we're going to prevail. And so if there is anything that you take away from my comments tonight, it is perspective. I've already started to write the newsletter because whenever I go out in the evening, I need to get it started earlier in the day so I don't stay up till 1 or 2 in the morning. I began to write about 9/11. And I'm writing about the unity that we felt as a nation for a few brief months. And it was a complicated unity because there were all sorts of Islamophobic feelings layered over it. But in terms of just feeling that we were unified as a nation, that part of it was a good thing. And we had that too on January 6th, but for like 30 minutes. Because by the time that Congress reconvened, the coup plotters in Congress had forgotten the bravery of the Capitol Police and the people who defended them, and the bravery of Nancy Pelosi, and the bravery of Mike Pence that might have lasted for 2 or 3 minutes that helped us get there. And it was close. It was close in a sense that other things might have happened, but even if those other things would have happened, we would have prevailed. We would have survived. I'm confident of that. And I understand this is a scary time. But what I would urge you to do is to know that you're sitting in Donna Jaffe's backyard tonight at a meeting with maybe 100 people. There are thousands, tens of thousands of groups like this across America doing exactly the same thing. There are enough good people doing enough good things to save all of us. Keep doing it. And I want to, Jessica touched on a source of anxiety that I want to try to take away from you, and then I'm going to close my comments. This is going to be a hard election. It's going to be close, even though I think when the votes are counted, I think Joe Biden will win by 15 million votes. I think he will have a bigger margin of victory than he did in 2020. But Joe Biden's going to trip over another sandbag. He's going to have a moment like any of us could have, and people will say, he has dementia. He might get COVID. He might fall off his bike and break a bone. Things could get worse. It could be very close. But let's just do a thought experiment and then get it out of the way. Let's assume that the Republican nominee wins in 2024. Is that the end of our democracy? Are we that weak? Is that all it takes to break 230 years of the greatest democracy ever to have graced the face of the earth? No. If a Republican wins in 2024, we will survive, we will endure, it will be painful, it will take hard work, but never say that that will be the end of of democracy, because it will not be. Not if good people like us continue to do good things. So let me just close by saying, I am honored that you read the newsletter. I'm humbled that you read the newsletter. And it is my honor to be here tonight with you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you are doing to help make democracy safe for my daughters and my granddaughters. Thank you.